Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Diabetes Sisters live class webinar, Diabetes and Burnout. My name is Anna Norton, and I'm the CEO of Diabetes Sisters. I will also be moderating today's webinar. Today, I'm excited to introduce Ginger Viera. Ginger is a longtime friend to Diabetes Sisters. She served on the faculty of the National Weekend for Women Conference series. She's contributed many articles to our website and our monthly e-newsletter. She's also lived with diabetes and celiac disease since 1999. She's a certified cognitive coach and diabetes coach and works with clients across the globe. She is a published author, writing books such as Dealing with Diabetes Burnout, Your Diabetes Science Experiment, and Emotional Eating with Diabetes. She also has a book dealing with type 1 diabetes and pregnancy that'll be released later this year. She currently resides in Vermont with her husband and daughter. Today, Ginger is going to talk about working your way through burnout without trying to suddenly cure diabetes overnight. Diabetes burnout is something that we all go through, and there is a way to work through it that's both motivating and empowering. Please welcome Ginger to lead us the next half hour on diabetes and burnout. Take it, Ginger.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming. So I'm just going to jump right into this. I think the biggest problem for a lot of us with burnout is that we feel like we shouldn't feel it. We feel embarrassed by it, ashamed by it. I'm just going to do a side note here that you might hear my daughter in the background. I'm trying to distract her with the Lion King. It may or may not work. But so burnout affects all of us, but we seem to think, when I've asked people about what they think burnout is or what they think about burnout, is the immediate thing we jump to is that burnout has to be when somebody has completely given up, thrown everything out the window, isn't checking their blood sugar, is hardly taking their insulin. That's just one version of burnout. So the problem for me when we think, oh, there's only one version of burnout, is that there isn't a way to acknowledge all the other versions that you and I can feel about diabetes. And that's why I think it's really important to realize that anything can cause burnout and anything can become burnout. So it doesn't have to be that you have completely given up and you just can't take another second of diabetes. It can just be because you're sick of diabetes today, or maybe you're just sick of diabetes for 2 hours of today. It can be because you're tired of all the painful technology, being a human pincushion, having 1,000 gadgets in your body, feeling like robo-diabetes person. That gets really tedious over time. It's not a normal thing that everyone else has to deal with. It's an added stressor that a lot of us don't even realize adds this weight on our shoulders because we're just so used to dealing with it and dealing with when it malfunctions. You can have just technology diabetes burnout. Burnout can also just be from things that have nothing to do with diabetes. You could have had a death in the family. My father passed a couple months ago, and you can absolutely bet that for 2 weeks, diabetes was not a priority in my life. And I very, very purposefully let my blood sugars run closer to 200 than 100 because I just didn't have the energy to give to diabetes while I was coping with this other huge thing that happened in life. Stress at work, stress at school, living with diabetes for decades, living with diabetes for 2 years. It doesn't matter. If you're sick of diabetes, if you're burnt out, then your burnout is valid. It's also just having a lack of support. If you're feeling really isolated, and hopefully, if you're on this call, you can connect to some people with diabetes if you found Diabetes Sisters. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm the only one in my house that has diabetes. I'm the only one that knows what it felt like yesterday when my blood sugar was under 40 for 2 hours. And I'll explain that later. But, my husband knows that sucks, but he doesn't know what it really feels like, that even 10 hours later when we're going to bed, that I still feel completely wiped because of that experience. So you can have burnout just because of tiny little moments of the day. And you could have burnout for none of these reasons. You could feel absolutely no reason for burning out. You could just be burnt out. You're just sick and tired of it. And that's the point, is that it can be anything. It doesn't have to mean that you're not doing anything. You might just be testing your blood sugar less often. You might be skipping your insulin drastically or skipping your insulin a little bit. You might be just skipping your insulin like for breakfast, but you're really good about your insulin in the other part of the day. You might be eating way more carbs than you usually eat, or way more dessert, or way more fast food than you usually eat, because you're just so tired of the responsibility of following the diabetic duties of eating well all day. Gosh, wouldn't it be so nice to just not know better when it comes to nutrition? I would love for a day to just be like really ignorant about nutrition and be like, this McDonald's hamburger and deep fried yada yada are so delicious. I'm sure these are fine for me. As people with diabetes, we just know better. It's inevitable. And that carries a tremendous burden. Letting our blood sugar run a little higher, purposely letting your blood sugar hang out in the 200s instead of the 100s, that can be your form of burnout. You can also just cry and swear and hide from your burnout, hide from the people in your life because you're burnt out. It can be anything. Candy for dinner, quietly hating it. You might not even change the way you're taking care of your diabetes or change the way you're eating, change the way you're exercising. You might just be in your head really wishing that you didn't have to deal with all this stuff. So that's the thing, is that burnout doesn't have to look like complete abandonment or, failure, in quotes. You can't see my fingers, but I'm putting air quotes on failure. It can just be that you are mentally sick of it. And that mentally sick of it might not impact your actions around your diabetes at all. But it still is valid. It still counts as burnout. And it's still worth acknowledging and letting yourself feel too. So one of the most helpful things I think someone can do once you realize that you're kind of feeling burnt out is to acknowledge it, to say it out loud, to write it down, to really say, okay, my burnout is the cause of my burnout. Right now, I'm going to say I just got over the stomach bug last weekend. I had to go to the ER on Sunday morning at 3 a.m. and the ER again at 10 p.m. on Sunday night. So Sunday was not my favorite day to be diabetic, and I had a really bad stomach bug, but the only reason I was in the ER is because I'm type 1 diabetic and I had all this Lantus in my system and I couldn't keep food down, right? So definitely the stomach bug is the cause of my diabetes burnout. And my diabetes burnout looks like, well, this week I'm still kind of recovering from that stomach bug. The only things I can tolerate eating are rice and Gatorade. So my diabetes burnout looks like kind of total disinterest in, obviously, I can't really help it. I can't eat other foods, but I'm really not interested in trying to keep my blood sugar around 90 all day for the past few days. I'm just trying to keep my blood sugar above 30 like it was the other day. So my diabetes burnout just looks like my blood sugars are running a little higher, and I'm really sick of being diabetic this week. So think about what those two sentences look like for you, because it's just about acknowledging it, to say it's okay that you have burnout. You deserve to feel burnt out. I think a lot of the problems that we have when it comes to burnout is that we feel ashamed, we feel guilty, we feel like we should be doing it perfectly all the time. And I know some really impressive people with type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes, and I can guarantee they don't do it perfectly all the time. The first name that comes to mind is Gary Shiner. He is a rock star. He knows everything there is to know about type 1 diabetes management, and he doesn't do it perfectly. He has days, I'm sure, where his blood sugars are running higher, where he's kind of stuck on a roller coaster, where he's just really sick and tired of managing his own diabetes. So it's really about validating that it's okay for you to feel burnt out. The moment you start to shame yourself and blame yourself for feeling burnt out is the moment you start to really kind of try to sweep your burnout under the rug, but that only makes it a bigger problem because you're not addressing it. You're not giving yourself credit for what you're dealing with every day and giving yourself room to be sick of what you deal with every day. So once you're kind of, acknowledging it, you've figured out what it is, then it's time to kind of think about how long you want to stay in your burnout. And obviously, we don't fully control that, right? Some people, burnout can last a year. For some people, burnout can last an hour or 3 weeks. Think about what it is that you need right now. for me, I know that what I really need is my stomach to feel normal again. And I just probably by the end of this coming week or weekend, I'm going to feel like myself again. So for me, my burnout this time is about a week long. And I know that I'm going to feel like dealing with diabetes head on at the end of this week. So think about what that period of time is for you. When my father died, I knew that my burnout was at least 2 weeks long. I didn't try to pinpoint when am I going to want to manage my diabetes tightly again. I just let myself feel the emotions about my father, did the best I could with my diabetes. And then once I felt like, okay, all right, I'm ready to get back on track here. I'm ready to just show up mentally for the day. That's when I started identifying that, okay, my burnout it's time to work through it, okay? So there's the phase of burnout, and then there's deciding that you're going to gradually get through to the next part, that kind of overcoming your burnout, okay? So when you are ready for that, and I really want to just go back to this page again and say, you don't have to push this to being here. Just give yourself time to be burnt out and make sure you're really ready. And when you are ready, depending on how long you've been burnt out or what your burnt out looked like, let's say that your version of burnout meant that you were really very rarely checking your blood sugar, especially before taking insulin or eating. You were just kind of winging it without any numbers to reflect on. So starting with one new goal when you're ready after that phase of burnout would be, maybe checking your blood sugar Monday through Wednesday, once a day, or maybe twice a day. I don't know what it is that you were doing specifically. If somebody was only checking once every other day on their blood sugar, oh, that's my high alarm on my CGM, if you can hear that, then their new goal might be to check every day. If you were already checking once a day during your burnout phase, then your new goal might be to check twice a day. The point is, though, that it's really small and it's very gradual, and it's not what we get caught in is saying, okay, I've been really neglecting my diabetes for the past month. I've really got to get back on track. Starting Monday, I'm going to do everything I should. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to eat perfectly. I'm going to test my blood sugar constantly. I'm going to take my insulin. And then, come Wednesday, you're like, oh my gosh, I suck at diabetes management because I can't do it perfectly. And I just went from burnt out to trying to be like a superstar. Aim for the beginning of that spectrum. Okay, you don't have to jump out of burnout and be a superstar. You can jump from burnout to, I'm going to start trying to do this a little more. I'm going to be a little more diligent about counting my carbs. Here are some examples of getting out of burnout goals. I will check my blood sugar before breakfast for the next week. I will eat a healthy low-carb lunch for the next 10 days. So that one would apply well if you're somebody who's been really stuck eating a lot of junk food and fast food and just rebelling against your diabetes with food, and you want to get back on track, just focus on one meal of the day rather than the whole day having to be perfect. Especially that's a common low-carb trap too. Is somebody says, okay, I'm going to follow a low-carb diet like a diabetic is supposed to. And then they go zero carb. It's really hard to maintain a zero-carb diet. So what happens? By like day 2.5, you end up failing because you're just plain old hungry. And zero carbs is really hard to sustain and achieve. And so you just end up bottoming out and eating everything in sight. Carbs aplenty. So make it small and realistic. I will write something nice about myself on a sticky note every day for 30 days. Then I will start checking my blood sugar more often. This one would apply for somebody who's really struggling emotionally with maybe their own diabetes self-management skills, their own diabetes self-management worth. If you have been in a real habit of telling yourself that you are horrible at managing diabetes, that you're a horrible diabetic, this would be a really useful approach, because the first thing that needs to be addressed is what's inside your head, not necessarily all the diabetes management duties. I will make time to dance every morning to 3 of my favorite songs. This will help me set the tone for my whole day. Again, this is about your mentality around your diabetes. Maybe you need to boost a little positivity into your day right from the start, right from the moment you wake up or when you're getting ready to go out the door for work. Think of a way to get yourself in a mental space where you feel lifted up, you feel cool, you feel good. Dance to songs where, hopefully there's no mirrors in your kitchen and you can't tell whether or not you look good dancing. You feel good in your body, and that will help you also want to take care of your body and feel good about walking around in your body. I will take at least 2 units of insulin with every meal of carbs. This would, of course, apply to someone who's been having trouble taking their insulin regularly. So 2 units would imply that maybe it really might be 6 units that somebody needs with their meal, but they're just trying to do a little bit. Rather than the pressure of carb counting and doing it all perfectly, they're just trying to get a little insulin in there with every meal, because that can be a little less daunting than, I've got to count the carbs and figure out how much insulin to take. That's tedious, that's frustrating, that's a pain. Just 2 units, just take at least 2 units so that you're getting some insulin in there. I will repeat in the mirror every morning for 1 week. Diabetes is not easy. I don't have to be perfect, and I'm doing the best I can. Honestly, this is like my mantra every day of my life with diabetes, because I want to do it perfectly, absolutely, but I mess up all the time, and I have to talk myself through that. Otherwise, I'm going to end up thinking I'm a failure, right? So you have to have a really strong commitment to that mentality of knowing, okay, I'm doing the best I can, but my best this time didn't quite work out. I'm going to try again. A few more goals. I will ask for help this week and let my family know I'm struggling. If you are someone who really hasn't let the people in your life know that you need help, it's time to let them know. It's time to ask somebody for help. It's really okay to ask for help. I will schedule this month and I'll show up. That's a tricky doctor's appointments. Those are not fun places to be often. So think about just one doctor's appointment that you've been putting off, that you kind of really owe that doctor some time so they can take care of you. I will pick 3 days each week to definitely go to the gym. That goes back to the feeling like you've got to do it all perfectly. 3 days a week to go to the gym is plenty. For some people, it might only be 1 day of the week to go to the gym. I will write down my diabetes thoughts and struggles for 1 week. This, again, is just about being honest and really expressing what's going on inside your head. Write them down, acknowledge them, let them be heard. Let me see, somebody's pulling my earphones out, I'm sorry. I will cook 1 healthy, yummy recipe each week for a month. So that's just 4 recipes that I'm talking about. This one really applies to when you feel like, okay, I've got to eat healthy. I'm going to cook something new every night. That's a really overwhelming task. That's crazy to expect somebody to cook something brand new every night of the week. Instead, pick 4 recipes that you want to try, that you want to learn, rather than 30 new recipes that you want to learn. This one's getting excited about bananas. Silly girl. I will give myself permission to eat 5 cookies every night, take my insulin, and enjoy every freaking bite. I saved this one for last because I feel like this is something that is a very common struggle, is realizing that it's okay to have dessert even on a low-carb diet. You can eat dessert on a low-carb diet. If most of your day was super low-carb and healthy, clean stuff, you can have dessert and still have awesome blood sugars and still feel good and be a healthy person. So it's just about finding what works for you. Reflect and repeat. So let's say you get to the end of that week where you were going to write down something positive every morning. See how you feel at the end of the week. Maybe that's a new habit that you want to stick with for a long period of time. Maybe your next step is a more lofty goal. Maybe it's time to start checking your blood sugar regularly. So just think about where you're at and what you need. In the very end, burnout is about not giving up, because you don't have to give 100% all the time to be doing a great job. You can give 40%, 30%. You can even give 10% and hopefully be okay. And if it's 10% just for a day, if you just took enough insulin to make sure you were alive, but that's what it took for you to get through, then that's what it took. And hopefully that's not where you stay very long. Hopefully you ask for help if that's really where you're at. But you're still not giving up completely. 10 is still more than 0. And that's really what I feel it comes down to, is you have to figure out your own coping methods. If you're going through a really rough period of burnout and you have to cope with that by cutting back in another area of your life, cutting back in an aspect of your diabetes to survive, that's really okay. In fact, I recommend it because we have to survive. Diabetes is tremendous. It's humongous. There are no days off except for the ones that you create for yourself, which are still not even days off. So think about what it is that helps you get through the day, and think about, maybe there's a long-term version of that you can do regularly to kind of ease repeated burnout, to sort of prevent more severe burnout from happening. For me, if somebody told me that I couldn't eat cookies every day of my life, I love baking cookies. I love gluten-free. I love eating gluten-free cookies as much as I love baking them. For me, making room for cookies in my life several days a week is it's really, sure, it's something I enjoy, but it's also a coping method because it makes me feel like, diabetes, sure, but I can still enjoy cookies. And I can still keep my A1C where I want my A1C. It's all about figuring out what you need to feel like diabetes is just a part of your life and not eating up your entire life. So I want to save some time for questions. Anna?
Yes, thank you, Ginger. Thank you. We actually do have a question. It came in. It says, can your burnout look different? As in, when you over-test, you're over-checking your carbs, you don't trust your carb to insulin ratio, or is that something different and not related at all to burnout?
I think that would really have to come down to a personal, I can absolutely see how that can feel like burnout because it's like the pressure of diabetes management, the pressure of that A1C. Anybody who's pregnant knows what that pressure and that OCD diabetes management feels like. And that, absolutely, there is a point to where checking your blood sugar too often can be unhealthy. So if that feels like burnout to you, then you'd kind of work in reverse. You'd say, okay, today I'm going to check my blood sugar 8 times instead of 14. Tomorrow I'm going to check my blood sugar 7 times instead of 14. And kind of work in reverse to help find a healthier place that you can sustain in your diabetes management that feels less stressful and less immense.
Thank you, Ginger. We actually don't have any other questions unless we get them in the next minute or so. I wanted to thank you for spending some time talking about this, for making this very relatable. Again, I mentioned when we started today's webinar how diabetes burnout can manifest itself in so many different ways for us and how we have all probably experienced it. And so it's always helpful to hear from you and make some of these goals very attainable and very realistic. And now we're getting lots of questions, which is great. So, so the next question is, what if my doctor or care team, oh, I lost it.
Good question.
What if my doctor or care team gives me goals that are just too much?
Yeah. That is when you speak up and say, listen, I know you want me to be the perfect diabetic robot, and please, use the word robot so that they get the point that, you are not a perfect human being. You're a flawed human being like everybody else, just like your doctor. And say to them, I get that you want me to be a perfect diabetic robot, but what you're asking me to do feels like too much for me. How about if instead I aim for A, B, and C? Make it a conversation. Speak up to them. Do not be intimidated by your doctor. They work for you. A lot of them cannot be very nice sometimes, and they can forget that you're a human being with a busy life. So recommend, point it out to them, the problem, what they're recommending, and recommend something else instead.
Okay. Someone is asking a question about seeking professional help from diabetes burnout. Is that ever something that's necessary in living life with diabetes?
Yeah, so there's a big difference between burnout and depression. So you know that you've kind of crossed that boundary into depression when your burnout is starting to really impair your safety and impair your very, what's the word, short-term health. If your version of burnout might end you up in the hospital, that's when it's really become a form of depression, and it's really time to seek help.
Okay. The next question is, do you have any recommendations specifically for balancing burnout with stress at work, dealing with both and how they definitely interact and make each other worse?
Yeah. Oh, well, so work is hard because you don't, hey, please, kiddo, you don't get to be your main boss at work. My main boss at work is often this one. But I think if you can't change what your expectations are at work, then that means it's time to lighten your expectations around your diabetes instead. Or maybe there is a conversation you can have with your boss where you say, you know, honestly, I'm feeling like I have too much on my plate right now. It's affecting my health. Is there a way that I can cut back? That's what I would do.
Okay. And then the last question that we have is just a question about how often, there's more. How often do you reset your basal doses? And I'm supposing that that's related to seeing sort of number swings just based on maybe what the basals are and then causing some burnout there.
Sure. So I'm not a certified diabetes educator. I just want to put that out there that right from the start, I'm going to recommend that if you don't have a great person to help you navigate your insulin needs and basal testing, I highly recommend working with Jennifer Smith at integrateddiabetes.com. She has type 1 diabetes, and she's one of the best CDEs on the planet, and she works with anybody across the globe via Skype. But on that note, you know, basal rates, technically our insulin needs change when things in our life change. So if you gain 5 pounds or lose 5 pounds, if you become more active or less active, if you start eating more carbs or less carbs, even the food you eat is going to impact your insulin needs. So think about, have there been changes in my life? And then, of course, as you brought this question, think about, are not reacting the way they ought to be reacting when I'm taking my insulin the way I'm supposed to take it. If you're having a lot of lows, you might actually be getting too much basal insulin because you're constantly correcting high. A sneaky thing about basal insulin tests. A lot of lows can mean you need more background insulin. So just take a step and look at what's going on.
Okay, thank you. One more. Do you use meditation or any other practices to relieve stress overall so that you can better cope with diabetes?
But that doesn't mean that you can't or you shouldn't. I think everybody's different. If you're someone that really experiences anxiety to an intense level, there's anxiety medications out there that you don't have to take every day in order to benefit from. You can just have them on hand for when you're having a really tough day. So if that is something that you feel like is a true struggle for you, talk to your doctor about that, because that could be really, it could keep you from, you know, really hitting rock bottom on a day where your anxiety is just at a 10.
Okay, I just got a correction. It's meditation, not medication.
Oh, I'm personally horrible at actual sitting meditation. My meditation is a moving meditation in the woods with a 30-pound baby on my back and 2 dogs. So for me, that is where I feel most at peace. I don't bring my phone. I'm just walking in the woods. I do bring my CGM sometimes, but you know, don't feel like you have to do a sitting, quiet meditation where you're trying to picture the color red the whole time or things like that. Meditation can be whatever helps you feel at peace, whatever helps you feel relaxed.
Okay, and then the last one, because we are actually running out of time, it's what tips could you give us to count carbohydrates more accurately? We're always burning carbohydrates. This person in particular has always used a certain amount of grams of carbohydrates for all meals across the board. So what tips could you provide for counting carbohydrates?
Well, the first thing is, unless you are taking a predetermined amount of insulin that your doctor has set, and therefore you have to eat that many carbs, it's really okay to be more flexible with your carb quantity. And, but that, again, I don't know what your medications and insulin doses are, so just be aware of that fact that I don't know that. But one of the best places to learn about the carb content in food is calorieking.com. There's also an app. So if you download that app, you'll know instantly how many carbs are in what you're eating. If you want to learn more about lower carb diet and lower carb nutrition overall, I really love the podcast Fat Burning Man. It's about eating real food, basically. Fat Burning Man.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Ginger. We do have to sign off, but before we do that, I want to thank everybody for registering and participating in today's webinar. We had over 50 people register, and as promised, we've taken all of the registrants, entered them into a drawing for a copy of Ginger's book, Dealing with Diabetes Burnout. The winner this time around is Shannon Caruso, so congratulations, Shannon. We'll be contacting you to send out your prize. If you would like to listen to this webinar again, please visit www.diabetessisters.org tomorrow morning, where we will have today's audio and presentation slides available. And please mark your calendars for our next webinar, Straight Talk about low-calorie sweeteners for people living with diabetes, which is scheduled for Wednesday, June 15th, and will be led by Hope Warshaw. Thank you all very much, and I will see you next month. Bye.